What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Greetings from Florida. My name is Joe Turino. I am your host, and today we've got another great episode for you as we're continuing our series on the history of the town of Gibsonton and the fascinating people that made it their home throughout the years. But before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you listen to the show so you never miss an episode. And please take a minute to rate and leave a short review, as it not only helps me know how I'm doing, it also helps other people find the show a little bit easier. And if you're really enjoying the show and know of other people who you think might enjoy it too, go ahead and send them over to our website, www.floridapod.com. This is where they can find direct links to the show on whatever major podcast platform they prefer. The website's also where you can contact me if you have any questions about the show or have any suggestions for future episodes. This is also where very soon you're going to be able to find the Florida blog, where I'll be sharing shorter stories that wouldn't make full episodes, as well as info on all kinds of cool places to check out around the state, how you can help with the preservation of some of our historic landmarks, and much more. And very soon we'll be launching the Florida Pod merch store, where you'll be able to pick up some cool gear as well to help support the show. So go check out www.floridapod.com, as well as our Instagram page at floridapod for updates for everything that's coming up soon. All right, so now we got that out of the way, let's get this show on the road. All right, so on our last episode, we learned about the origins of the earliest known carnivals and how over the years, those transformed into the American traveling carnival as we know it today. We learned about the history of sideshows, and we met some of the extraordinary people who were able to use their natural deformities and abnormalities to make an honest living, with some of them even achieving celebrity status. People like Charles Stratton, aka Tom Thumb, who performed for President Abraham Lincoln, as well as for Queen Victoria and the royal family, who he actually performed for multiple times. We learned about the 1893 Chicago World's Fair and how its famous Midway Plaisance, I'll never get that word right, would become the inspiration for midways of traveling carnivals for years to come. And we learned about the different types of sideshows offered on the Midway, like the museum show and the 10-in-1, as well as the acts they offered, like the freak show, working acts, geek shows, and pickled punks, my favorite. And we finally learned about how a couple of carnival concession operators' decision to pull over and take a little break during a road trip near a little Florida fishing village changed the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of carnival and circus owners and workers forever. Starting with the LeMays and later the Tomanis, Gibsonton quickly grew into a community for anyone and everyone who just didn't quite fit in anywhere else. It was a place where oddballs and outsiders were welcome and could call home. A real-life island of misfit toys where the term freak was worn as a badge of honor. Gibsonton truly was heaven on earth for so many, and through the years it continued to grow as it attracted more and more show people of all types. And as I stated in the previous episode, Gibsonton was one of the most inclusive places on earth at the time, and it was the only place that any of these people could truly be themselves, no matter their size, shape, creed, color, or if they had a disability or genetic abnormality. By 1945, Gibsonton had a population of 1,091 residents. And because of the seasonal nature of carnival work, Gibsonton's population would peak between November to May, when residents recuperated from months on the road, renewing friendships, catching up on gossip, and falling in love. Yet life in Gibsonton was not all play. And by 1957, Gibsonton had developed into a strong community despite the seasonal migration of the majority of its population. At this time, Gibsonton covered an area of over 1,000 acres with around 900 houses, 2 churches, several grocery stores, and assorted other businesses, a tiny post office, 3 trailer parks, and of course, the Giants fishing camp. However, Gibsonton grew at the expense of its neighboring communities as it swallowed up Adamsville, Gardensville, and Garden City. In 1959, the Gardensville school closed, replaced by Gibsonton Elementary School, and high school students were shipped off to Wimauma, which is about 15 miles to the southeast. And when the U.S. Highway 41 was widened from 2 to 4 lanes in the 1950s, the growth of Gibsonton accelerated. Unfortunately, carnival people and non-carnival people alike were impacted. The Tomanis had to move their restaurant as it was in the way of the expanding road, and they even lost some of their land in the process. Even Eddie's Hut, which was considered to be the town's social center ever since it was opened by Eddie and Grace LeMay back in late December of 1929, it was a casualty of the expanded highway. As housing developments and trailer parks sprang up, cattle ranchers and farmers were pushed further and further east of Gibsonton. In 1960, 1,673 people called Gibsonton home and still continued to attract show people throughout the decade. One of these people was a man by the name of Ward Hall, who moved to Gibsonton in 1966 to form a new company to produce a state fair sideshow. Now, this name may not mean much to the average person. I mean, it really didn't mean anything to me at all until I started researching for this series. But if you've ever worked in or followed the carnival or circus business in any capacity, then you know the name Ward Hall. Ward Hall was a rock star. He was a true legend. And he was considered by most in the business to be a modern-day P.T. Barnum. And due to his long, successful career owning and running various sideshows, he even earned the nickname the King of the Sideshow. Now, throughout his career, Ward Hall worked with many famous people in the sideshow industry, such as Priscilla Bejano, the Monkey Girl, who we met in part 1 of this series, the 3-foot, 7-inch dwarf fire eater named Norbit, Pete Tierney, whose stage name was Pooh Bah, Dick Brisbane, who was known as Penguin Boy as he was born with his feet growing directly from his hips, which caused him to waddle when he walked. There was Stanley Barrett, known as CeeLo the Seal Boy, as he was born with stumps for arms, and Louise Capps Hill, the armless girl who drove a tractor, milked cows, played guitar, and raised her children on her farm using nothing but her legs and feet. There was Grace McDaniels, the mule-faced woman, Melvin Burkhart, who we also met on the first episode as the human blockhead or the anatomical wonder, Eddie Kamel the giant, Betty Lou Williams, the double body girl, Frank Lentini, the three-legged man, Dolly Reagan, the ossified girl, Betty McGregor, better known as Stella the bearded lady, Sandra Reed, the albino girl, Albert Short, the rubber man, William Dirks, the three-eyed man or the two-faced man, depending on who you asked, and Johan Peterson, the Viking giant, just to name a few. Ward Hall also wrote 4 books as well as 4 musical stage productions. He appeared in and worked as a consultant on 7 movies and was featured in more than 100 videos and TV specials. He also performed in Madison Square Garden and at the Lincoln Center in New York City, and even sang in Carnegie Hall. Ward Miles Hall was born on June 21, 1930 in Trenton, Nebraska, to Glenn and Opal Hall, who separated when he was young. His father worked for railroads, and his mother would later become a credit manager. As a boy, Ward always wanted to become a circus performer, and he eventually made that dream a reality. Ward visited each circus as it came through his hometown and even read books about the circus in the Denver Public Library. It was here that he learned about the Billboard, a weekly show business newspaper which shared the routes of each circus. He then saw that the Daly Brothers Railroad Circus would be showing up in nearby Boulder, Colorado in July of 1945. So he took a Greyhound bus to Boulder and worked to earn a pass to the show by helping set it up. At 15 years old, he left home once again to join the Daly Brothers Circus, this time in Central Texas, and he never returned home again. The show had advertised for a fire eater and magician, and Ward quickly began practicing doing magic tricks, fire eating, and puppeteering using instructions from the library books he had brought with him. Ward got a can of gasoline and some torches and tried to give himself a lesson. In an interview with the Huffington Post from back in 2014, Ward stated, "The second day I decided, I told these people I can eat fire. I better see what I can do about learning to do it. I don't know what I expected I was going to do, but what I did was to burn the hell out of my face. Not only did I burn myself, but in the excitement of doing so, I kicked over the can of gasoline and set the building on fire." But Ward did not let this little painful mishap stop him. He stuck with the business and soon began performing at the circus as a juggler and wire walker. He eventually worked with a lion act and learned how to pitch. By 1950, Ward Hall purchased his first sideshow with his partner Harry Leonard from Freers United Shows. Unfortunately, it was around this time that the carnival business had started to change. In the late 1940s and early 50s, European manufacturers that had made weaponry during World War II transitioned their businesses into making other things, including rides, which began taking over as the main attraction at carnivals. And at the same time, a lot of the old prominent showmen from the early days were dying out. Of course, Ward, who knew an opportunity when he saw one, began to buy up some of his competitors, and soon he became one of the most dominant presenters in a shrinking field. Hall's Circus Sideshow toured with many major carnivals. There was the Cavalcade of Amusements, William T. Collins Shows, Rod Link's World of Pleasure Shows, and many more covering the Midwest through the early 1960s. Hall and his partner then formed a show called The Pygmy Village. For 7 years, he was partnered with Nate Eagles, producing the sideshow for the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus at Madison Square Garden. In his career, Hall was connected to over 15 circuses, such as Circus Vargas, Kelly Miller Circus, Toby Tyler Circus, and many more. Hall moved to Gibsonton in 1966 and partnered with C.M. Christ to form a company to produce a state fair sideshow for Gooding's $1 Million Midway, where they stayed for several years. The show they created would be known as the Christ and Hall Sideshow, but later became known as the World of Wonders. Hall and Christ, along with their World of Wonders, worked together with a common purpose of creating memories and excitement for families and event patrons as they toured the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. Additionally, they shared a passion for training and developing the hundreds of aspiring performers who traveled with the show over the next several decades. In the early days, he relied heavily on freaks, presenting acts like the alligator-skinned man, who, as we spoke about on episode 1 of this series, had a skin condition called ichthyosis, which caused a covering of thick, scaly skin all over his body. By the late 1960s, freak shows were coming under attack as demeaning to people with disabilities, but Mr. Hall maintained that the sideshow, especially in an era before equal opportunity laws and medical treatments had somewhat leveled the playing field, was one of the few places where people with these kinds of conditions can make a decent living. In a 2006 interview with the New York Times, Mr. Hall stated, I'm telling you, this life was very good for freaks. These kinds of people made money. They were hams, but they could never be actors. Who's putting a bearded lady or a one-armed girl in a leading role on Broadway? This way they lived a great life. Then in 1972, Ward Hall's show came under attack from a political correctness group who believed the workers were being exploited. Now at first, there was a situation during a sideshow owned by a man named Slim Kelly up in Raleigh, North Carolina, when a young deformed girl in a wheelchair objected to the sideshow. It was taken to court there and it got kicked out. Then during the Manatee County Fair back in Florida, there was an article written in the St. Petersburg Times about a frog girl show, and it quoted a law that was written back in 1921, which prohibits the exhibition for pay or compensation of any crippled or physically distorted, malformed, or disfigured person in any circus, sideshow, or other place where admission fee is charged, and makes the violation thereof punishable by 1 year imprisonment or a $1,000 fine. And despite all the years that they lived and worked in Florida, this was the first time that Ward or any of his crew had ever heard of this law. According to Ward, in his 1995 interview with Shocked and Amazed, his immediate reaction was that these people live in Florida, they own property in Florida, they pay their taxes in Florida, and yet they would not be able to work in Florida? So Ward and the others decided to do something about it. Ward's company, World Attractions Inc., along with Stanley Barrett, known as CeeLo the Seal Boy, and Pete Tierney, who was known as the Poobah, decided to seek legal advice on the matter. Ward and Company turned to an attorney by the name of Roy Flagg Jonas, who practiced out of Miami Beach. After gathering information, Roy immediately took the case. Roy had formerly been the mayor of North Bay Village, which is between Miami and Miami Beach. Because of this, he decided to apply for a license for a freak show for North Bay Village, with the understanding that the chief of police was going to turn down the application for the license on the basis of this law, which now gave them somebody to sue. Now at the time, Richard Gerstein was the state attorney for Dade County, now Miami-Dade County, which is where the case was going to be tried. Richard Gerstein was also a member of the Miami Showmen's Association, and he agreed that he would fight this suit because normally this was something that would just be thrown out of court. But they needed this to not only go to court, they needed to lose. So they went to court in Miami-Dade County and lost the case, which now gave them the privilege of going to the Court of Appeals. Once it went to the Court of Appeals, they lost again, which was exactly what they needed. This process continued until it finally went on to the Supreme Court for the state of Florida, where only one of the 6 judges voted for the law, while the others voted in favor of Ward and his freaks. The law was stricken and removed from the books, as it was now deemed unconstitutional to deny people with deviating bodies the right to work. By 1975, Gibsonton's population doubled from the summer low of 2,500 to the winter peak of 5,000 people. Other changes have occurred as well. During the 1970s, the whole carnival industry went through transformations, and during the height of its popularity in the 1930s and 40s, nearly 100 carnival sideshows competed against one another. By the end of the 70s, there were approximately 500 circuses that still existed, but there were only a mere 7 sideshows that remained in operation. 4 of them were owned by one Gibsonton resident, Ward Hall. Medical advancements eliminated or removed many physical deformities that motivated the young to join the circus. In response, big ride attractions began taking a more prominent stage in carnivals. In the 1930s, a big carnival might have had only 12 rides in comparison to possibly 3 dozen sideshows. 40 years later, the same carnival would have nearly 80 rides with only 5 sideshows. The invention of the television further cut into carnival revenues, and the establishment of minimum wage further cut into profits. Gibsonton began transforming itself into a carnival retirement community. Additionally, in 1968, the International Independent Showmen's Association started its first annual trade show in Gibsonton, and by the mid-1970s, the outdoor amusement trade show had become the largest in the world, attracting buyers and displayers from as far away as Latin America and Europe. Ward's company continued to grow to the point in the late 1970s where they had 4 state fair sideshows and 8 grind shows with 70 employees. These shows played all the major fairs: the Ohio State Fair, the Minnesota State Fair, the Wisconsin State Fair, and most of the major fairs east of the Mississippi. Hall also produced a special show for the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus for special engagements and for 2 years at the Circus World in Florida. Ward was nominated president of the International Independent Showmen's Association in 1974 and 75 due to the unexpected passing of his predecessor. His president's banquet and ball was the most elaborate and exciting of all time and is still talked about to this day. He spent 14 years on the board of directors of the Outdoor Amusement Business Association and was board member emeritus of the IISA. Hall was inducted into the Circus Ring of Fame, the IISA Hall of Fame, and the OABA Hall of Fame. In 1981, Hall produced 12 shows for the Ohio State Fair when they made it a pay-one price at the gate, and that year it jumped to being the #1 attended fair in the nation. Also at this time, Hall operated 2 permanent wax museums on the seashore at resorts in New Jersey. Now, Ward Hall was a prolific storyteller throughout his life, but one true story that he never told anyone because he felt that nobody would believe it was that on April 22nd, 1994, he appeared in, was the MC for, and sang in a one-night show at Carnegie Hall called Circus Blues. He also made an appearance at the Lincoln Center and 4 trips to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington to produce shows for their spring celebration. The king of the sideshow continued to work in show business throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, and he had no intention of slowing down either. Hall loved being a showman. There was no greater thrill for him than to be up performing in front of a crowd. But for a man in his late 70s, life on the road had just become way too difficult for him. Ward retired numerous times only to return to the business for one reason or another. In 2010, Tommy Breen, who had joined the show as a sword swallower in 2005, became partners with Hall and Christ in owning World of Wonders, with Breen managing the traveling cast of performers on the road, while Christ and Hall managed bookings, routings, and administration from their home in Gibsonton. And in 2016, Breen purchased the show and became the sole owner of the World of Wonders, while Hall and Christ retired full-time. Ward Hall was one of the few remaining showmen left in the small town that so many of them called home. By this time, most of his closest friends, the Freaks, had either moved away or had passed. The rest of them continued to live in Gibsonton, more than likely in a retirement village that was built solely for aging or retired circus performers. The village itself, perhaps ironically, looks like an empty fairground. Each unit is a self-contained apartment with a small front porch and a little barbecue grill, and is paid for completely by the dues paid by the 5,000 plus members of the International Independent Showmen's Association. And after an absolutely incredible lifetime in show business, Ward Hall passed away on August 31st, 2018, at the age of 88. Now, the king may be gone, but his legacy and contribution to show business lives on. Tommy Breen and his World of Wonders continues to tour as one of the last remaining touring sideshows in the country. And the International Independent Showmen's Museum not only continues to honor Gibsonton's claim to fame, but pays homage to Ward Hall as its first Hall of Fame inductee. The museum itself is 52,000 square feet of sideshow history come alive, complete with an old Ferris wheel in the middle of the massive space, as well as other long unused rides, curiosities, and exhibits showcasing the history of the carnival and circus, the town of Gibsonton, and the remarkable people who called it home. And that's the story of the king of the sideshow. Now, I believe that every single person that I've mentioned so far in this series deserves to be recognized in the International Independent Showmen's Museum, and I'm pretty sure they probably will be at some point due to their contribution to Gibsonton and to their chosen profession. Hell, I'm even positive that each and every one of them could have their own episode on this show, but if I did that, we might as well change the name of the show to Greetings from Gibtown, because we'd be here for a very, very long time. That being said, I do have one more story that I want to share with you before we move on to our next tale from somewhere in Florida. In fact, this story is the reason that I started digging into the history of Gibsonton in the first place. So for our next episode, and for the conclusion to this series on the remarkable residents of Gibsonton, we'll be getting into some true crime as we discuss the life, career, and eventual murder of Grady Stiles Jr., aka Lobster Boy. And that does it for this episode of Greetings from Florida. Thank you all for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And please don't forget to rate and leave a review, as it helps more people find the show. Please visit www.floridapod.com for show-related news and updates, as well as links to all episodes and socials. And coming soon, the Florida blog and merch page. You can also contact us via the website or at floridiapod@gmail.com if you have any questions about the show, or if you have any topics that you want to hear covered on a future episode. Thank you to Ernesto Paez and his band Modern Mimes for the awesome theme music for the show. Go check out their website, www.modernmimes.com, for links to everywhere you can stream and purchase their music. Check out their music videos and look up tour dates and ticket information, band merch, and links to their socials. Go check out warpartyparanormal.com for team member bios, links to our team socials, dates and ticket info to our upcoming public ghost hunting events, and for links to the War Party Paranormal Radio Show and the Haunted Files. Please contact us if you or someone you know are experiencing paranormal occurrences in your own home or business and need some help. We primarily cover the state of Florida, but we can help get you in contact with somebody near you if you are out of state. So if you're having some issues, reach out to us. We'll be back real soon with an all-new episode of Greetings from Florida, but until then, stay weird, Florida. We'll see you next time.